From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report this first weekend in June. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. Fallout from falling net farm income.
It seemed like machinery complement was really the number one. I don't think not a big surprise.
As farmers look to cut costs, what else could take a hit? That's our Farm Journal report. Under pressure, what's causing grain prices to fall?
Now the market assumes we're going to get the rest of the crop in the ground, and June is just such a hard time.
Yet cash cattle prices continue to soar. We'll tell you why. Plus, if you're still searching for the perfect summer road trip, we may have an enchanted idea.
U.S. Farm Report, presented by Pioneer. What's next happens when experience meets expertise. Pioneer. What's next happens here.
Now for the news, we lead off with a couple updates on the H5N1 front. First, Michigan officials confirming there is another human case. And also, we are learning that H5N1 has been detected in meat. It came from a culled dairy cow, but the meat never entered the food supply chain. Starting off with the human case, health officials say another Michigan dairy worker has been diagnosed with avian influenza. It's the third human case associated with an outbreak in U.S. dairy cows. The case was announced on Thursday. The person developed respiratory symptoms, but unlike the other two workers who had just mild eye symptoms. Michigan health officials say the farm worker was quickly provided antivirals and is recovering from those respiratory symptoms. But also, USDA's Food Safety and Health Inspection Service says viral particles of the virus were detected in tissue samples from one cow a week ago Wednesday. The cow was part of a normal testing of 96 dairy cows. They say the remaining tested negative for the virus, and no meat from any of the cows entered the food supply chain. Officials continue to say the risk of the virus spreading among humans is low.
I don't think it ever has or will get bad, and unless there's some big surprises there. So from that context, I think it's one that we will have to deal with, certainly for this summer's grilling season, potentially longer. Because it's a 7 to 10 days deal. The cow's fine. I don't think it's a game changer, but it's just one of those things that's constantly there. I think that industry has done a great job of conveying to consumers the product is safe.
Also, USDA confirming the first detection of H5N1 in alpacas. It says 4 of the 18 animals tested positive on a farm in Idaho, where poultry had also tested positive for the virus. Officials also say the gene sequence of the viruses isolated from the alpacas shows it's closely related to the one that is circulating in some dairy cattle. Also, H5N1 detected in 2 feral cats found dead in Curry County, New Mexico. And avian influenza also continues to be an issue for the poultry and egg industries. Iowa state officials saying more than 4 million chickens in Iowa will have to be killed at a large egg farm in Sioux County. It marks the first confirmation of highly pathogenic avian influenza in a commercial or backyard poultry flock this year in Iowa. USDA reports more than 92 million birds have been culled since 2022. Also new this week, China's now blocking certain beef shipments from 2 U.S. facilities over traces of ractopamine. This is according to USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service. The affected facilities included the Swift Beef Company in Greeley, Colorado, and Coolport Oakland in Oakland, California. According to FSIS, the decision started on May 27th. The world's largest meat processor, JBS, says it's working with U.S. and Chinese authorities to resolve the issue. Ractopamine is a feed additive used to promote lean muscle growth in animals, but is currently banned in China. Well, Texas and surrounding states still reeling from the aftermath of recently deadly tornadoes and now cleaning up from a new round of storms. Torrential rain and powerful winds whipped through the Dallas, Texas area early Tuesday, bringing wind gusts over 80 miles an hour and large hail to some areas. The Texas Panhandle also seen massive hail this week.
We've lost cows, we've lost pigs, we lost one of our dogs. My husband's lost his horse.
Officials warning the widespread power outages in the south could last for days. Those dangerous storms took the life of a Colorado rancher and 34 head of cattle. The Associated Press reports 51-year-old Mike Morgan was feeding his cattle from a trailer when he was struck by lightning. They say the lightning bolt struck on a wide open pasture outside the town of Rand. That's about 80 miles northwest of Denver. The strike also knocked down about 100 head of cattle that were near the trailer. 34 died. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office says that Morgan died on the scene. It's reported on average 270 people are struck by lightning in the U.S. each year. Only about 10% are killed. The Biden administration announcing a plan this week it hopes will help strengthen voluntary carbon markets. It's a growing market, and with changes and more structure, the White House hopes those participating can differentiate between what's having the biggest impact. The White House laying out 7 principles. They include making sure carbon credits meet credible standards and represent real decarbonization, that the credits should avoid environmental and social harm. Corporations that use the credits should prioritize measurable emissions reductions within their own value chains, and they should publicly disclose the nature of those purchases and retired credits. It also says any claims made publicly should accurately reflect the climate impact. Market participants should contribute to efforts that improve market integrity, and policymakers and those in the market should seek to lower costs. The White House saying with the new principles, stakeholders must be certain that one credit truly represents 1 ton of carbon dioxide or its equivalent reduced or removed from the atmosphere beyond what they would have otherwise occurred. More severe weather and more rain. We'll have a check of your forecast coming up.
U.S. Farm Report weather is brought to you by H&S Manufacturing. With 5 models ranging from 1,300 to the large 4,200 gallon and the ability to provide an excellent spread pattern, H&S has a Top Shot side discharge manure spreader to fit your operation. Find out more at the H&S website.
More severe weather this week. That's as heavy rain, high winds, and hail hit Greeley, Colorado Tuesday night, making the ground look like it was covered in snow. The golf ball-sized hail came from a thunderstorm that was nearly stationary for more than an hour. Martin Lauermore joining us now with a look at what we can expect in the upcoming week in terms of weather.
Yeah, we've still been watching very closely on this drought monitor. We have the newest one that came out just a few days ago, and still areas that are seeing that drought, unfortunately not seeing much relief. Now, you could see, again, parts of western Kansas, a lot of that winter wheat being harvested in this area. They need some of that rainfall. We're actually starting to see just a little bit of a sliver of extreme drought now popping into, again, some parts of western Kansas. The entire state of New Mexico hasn't seen much rain in the past several weeks, almost months now, and a good portion of the entire state is under a moderate to a severe drought, and the only place in the country sitting under that exceptional drought as of right now. We also want to put your attention to Florida. Yeah, we're starting to see quite a bit of the state now being encompassed by moderate to severe drought today. It is definitely looking to see the very warm temperatures egging on a lot of the drought conditions across that part of the country. And again, starting to see some of those grass fires actually now popping in, and some of them getting out of control, but we have been told that most of those are now contained. So we are looking better on that front. As we look at the estimated rainfall of the next 7 days, unfortunately, areas that are not wanting to see the rain are going to see more, and the areas that want to see the rain not going to be seeing much over the next 7 days. So we'll be watching that pretty closely. And again, we're also watching pretty closely on our flooding potential as we get into our Sunday. You can see again areas in the center part of the country where they are watching for some of that flooding potential. Luckily, very low end flooding potential, I might want to add. And as we get into that Monday, still going to be meandering there as we head into that next part of your work week with a handful of small areas seeing that potential for a little bit of flooding, both in the potential of broad scale and flash flooding as we get into that next part of our work week. Now we look at the jet stream. This is something very important we want to pay attention to over this next work week, because as we get into that Sunday, Monday, you see this little dome, what we call it, this very warm air. This is an area of high pressure that is going to push its way into parts of the country as we head into that Wednesday and Thursday. We could see just look how large this area of high pressure is going to be over parts of the Four Corners, the Mojave Desert. Very, very hot air is going to be settling in on there. We actually call this a heat dome, and it does set up during the summertime. It's a little bit early, but again, we could be seeing some very warm weather as we head into that next part of the work week with some of that very hot temperatures that's been bottled up in southern Texas and southern Florida, breaking its way into other areas, part of the country. So it's something we're watching out for as we get into the last part of this work week.
Thanks, Martin. Well, wheat prices have been on fire, and there have been some eye-popping cash cattle trades happening across the country. Chip Nellinger and Joe Baklovic join me next to talk markets.
Introducing Grow Getters with Davis Michelson, a podcast that shines light on agriculture's most innovative side hustles. Find the latest episodes on Farm Journal's YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. Chip Nellinger and Joe Baklovic joining us. Joe, saw some pressure in the grain markets this week. Is it fundamentals or are there some outside factors pressuring prices?
I think it's mostly fundamental. I think the row crop markets rallied a little bit on planting delays, on the idea that the Corn Belt was too wet. We saw crop progress numbers out on Monday, and we're kind of ahead of schedule for the most part. There are areas with delays. There are areas that are too wet. There are definitely areas where crops were planted in less than ideal conditions. But it feels like for the moment in the row crop markets that story has kind of come and gone. And now it's going to be on to growing season weather. Is there enough rain, crop conditions, that sort of thing? The forecast is actually wet, which I think has shifted from kind of a bullish thing into maybe even a bearish thing as June approaches.
Yeah, so speaking of that, Chip, USDA says we're 83% planted on corn. That's actually a point ahead of normal. 68% planted on soybeans. That's 5 points ahead. So it seems like that story is kind of dying down a little bit about, are we going to get this crop planted? But we had heavy weekend rainfall in the central Corn Belt, Tennessee River Basin. That is expected to continue. So as Joe mentioned, how much is the trade watching some of these forecasts right now?
Well, I think weather is always going to be an underlying factor there, right? But I think to Joe's point, now the market assumes we're going to get the rest of the crop in the ground, and June is just such a hard time. I know, notwithstanding there are problems out there, right? There's people still trying to figure out how they're going to get the last of the corn planted. There's some replant that needs to happen out there. There's some population issues on the stuff that did get planted. Has been some switching of corn to beans. There's actually been a little bit of prevent plant that's going to be taken out there. And so all those things make it, in my mind, much harder to hit 181 national average yield. But the problem is in June, once the corn's there, it's growing, it's up, it's hitting the nitrogen, it's green, it's lush. It's hard to create a bullish scenario in June in corn. And I think that's kind of the fact that we're seeing this pressure coming into the end of the month here as we're about to turn the calendar into June here. The next 2 or 3 weeks could get a little bit ugly just because of that seasonal tendency. And now, even though there's problems out there, the crop seems to be in the ground in the market's mind.
Joe, Chip went there. He's already debating the national yield.
So is everybody else. And it's going to become a more popular topic, of course. I think that there's two ways to think about it. One is you can't predict the yield in May. If you have a yield prediction outright, I think the yield is going to be 175. That's crazy. Is it crazy to say that the top end has been removed in May because a lot of the crop was planted in less than ideal conditions? Maybe that's not a crazy thing to say. I don't know. I don't have a yield prediction. I think trend is still possible, but you're going to need a lot of things to go right.
Yeah, not only planting, but replant. Hearing a lot of that this year as well. Okay, Chip, really all eyes right now are on Russia's wheat crop. We've seen that momentum and what it's brought to the wheat market and other markets as well. So we're watching weather, though, right now in Russia's southern region, as we're talking about some warm and hot winds. That could cause some further stress on that crop. So do you think that story still has some legs in this wheat market?
I think it does. I think obviously after a $2 rally in wheat, we've factored in a lot of losses there. The question longer term becomes, is how much will Russia be able to export? Will they ban exports at some point in time? And how much will India have to import eventually? So, we're about to hit right ahead of harvest here. So it's logical in my mind why we're setting back a little bit. But I don't think that the potential bullishness of the wheat market goes away. It just might take several weeks to months to figure out more of the story there.
Joe, is it possible that wheat prices could carry corn prices this year?
It is possible. That being said, wheat out of the U.S. has seen no uptick in demand. We've seen no big increase in export demand, despite the fact, as it seems, that the world's largest wheat exporter has big crop problems and that one of the biggest users is going to import wheat for the first time in a few years. We need to, for this rally to really stick, you're going to need to see an uptick in demand for U.S. wheat, which we just haven't seen yet. I'm not going to say it's impossible. The trend is higher. It's very clearly in a short-term uptrend. Wheat, I know we peeled back a little bit at the end of the week, but it is possible. Is it likely? I don't know, but it's possible.
Well, we did see some strong cash cattle trade this week. Futures markets got spooked by some export news, so we need to talk about that and break it all down. We'll do that with Chip and Joe after the break. Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. Well, Joe also hosts a daily podcast, and this week on the podcast, he asked the question, is USDA too bearish? So I want to get both of your takes on that. Chip, I'll start with you.
Oh, we need a whole half hour to talk about that time. Are they too bearish? I think at the end of the day, it's easy to cuss the USDA and the job they do, but it is a large task that they have, massive amounts of data they have to crunch. I think they do the best they can. I think there's obviously holes in some of the processes that they use to kind of come up with some of their yield and projections out there. So at the end of the day, I don't think they're too bearish. I think they need to maybe fix a few of the flaws that they have in their internal systems, though.
Joe, you posed the question, so now I'm on your podcast, so now I'm asking you to answer it. Is USDA too bearish?
It was a simple title to a simple show, but the context here was this: USDA is way above the crop estimates for Russia that are coming out of Russia. Their export number is well above the estimates that are coming out of Russia. And then you've got this India wheat import thing, not to mention the discrepancies between USDA and the Brazilian government when it comes to the soybean crop there. There's a lot of not necessarily indications, but there's a lot of discrepancies between USDA and some of their overseas counterparts. In all instances, or a lot of them, USDA is way above some of these private entities or even government entities when it comes to crop estimates. So are they too bearish? Maybe that's not the right word, or maybe it needs some explanation. Are their estimates too high or too low for imports in some instances? And I don't know if that situation is going to be rectified or not, but there are a lot of people that think that USDA needs to change some of these wheat numbers fairly drastically.
Simple show. Simple title. I get what you're saying, and you're a simple man, but Joe, that's what makes the podcast so digestible. All right, Chip, let's move to cattle, because we did see some impressive cash cattle action this week. Futures on a bit of a different path. What is the struggle in the cattle market?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think there was a news story out about China, potentially banning, U.S. beef imports from one particular packing plant in Greeley, Colorado. That may or may not have been kind of an old news story that's been recycled, or maybe more smoke than actual fire there. I think at the end of the day, that didn't help us, but we're coming into the end of the month, and I think the funds have been on the long side for a few weeks. Probably just some end of the month profit taking, and that news story maybe threw a little fuel on that fire. End of the day, the way I look at it, still extremely tight numbers. We're going to have some strong cash markets, it looks like, going deep into summer here.
Joe, do you think the cash cattle market continues to be strong?
Yeah, I do. I think that the headline was a good excuse to sell off a thinly traded market. People don't realize how thinly traded cattle and feeder cattle are on the board. It's not hard, and it doesn't take much for a move similar to what we saw on Wednesday. And you get one little headline. That's all it takes sometimes. But the cash market's very strong. I don't think that headline in itself really changes the trajectory of cattle prices or the cattle situation long term.
All right, Joe, Chip, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. We need to take a quick break, and then we'll have more on U.S. Farm Report when we come back.
Introducing Unscripted with Tyne Morgan and Clinton Griffiths. Real, raw, and entertaining. A new episode is available every Friday on Farm Journal's YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts.
Join me, folks, as we take our tractor tail cameras to Illinois this week to check out a classic Farmall H.
1950 Farmall H. Been in my wife's family for 50 years or so. I don't know that they bought it new, but they had it farmed with it for years, had corn pickers and that type of thing on it back when they were, a farming tractor, so to speak. And after that ran augers and different things when augers were smaller than what they are today. Just hangs out here in the shed, and once in a while get it out for, sometimes if we have some type of gathering here, we'll get some of the restored tractors out and put them on display, things like that, maybe go on a parade here or there. It was in running condition pretty much Just mostly just repainted it and a few minor things, so not a terrible amount of things to get it in this condition. It runs like it's supposed to. I prefer the electronic ignition, but that's just me. It'll just stay here in the shed and probably until my brother-in-law decides that, he'll never decide to sell it, so it'll be after he's gone for sure. So.
Thanks, Greg. Well, as net farm income falls, equipment purchases over the next year could take a big hit. But what other areas are farmers possibly looking to cut back on? That's our Farm Journal report after the break.
You're watching U.S. Farm Report. Trusted, timely, tradition.
The reality of falling net farm income is fallout that could ripple across the entire agricultural industry. And as farmers look to cut costs, what type of purchases could farmers be forced to cut first? That's this week's Farm Journal report. The push to plant continues for some farmers to close out May, while others have wrapped up. And with some improvement in commodity prices, ag economists are growing slightly more optimistic on the ag economy.
I think you can look at things like crops in South America. You know, we've had some disease issues in places like Argentina. We've had some wet weather in Brazil. Some of those things I think have been helpful to boost prices at the same time.
University of Missouri's Scott Brown helps author the Ag Economist Monthly Monitor, a joint survey conducted by the University of Missouri and Farm Journal each month.
The wheat situation in Russia I think has also been important. I think it's important to remind ourselves the changes happen really quickly. The volatility up and down is going to continue in front of us. So although we generally say the trend is down, there will be opportunities for better prices in front of us at times.
Even with more optimism for some commodities, ag economists' views on the net farm income picture did erode, falling from the $117.82 billion projected last month to just $110.4 billion this month. But Arlen Suderman, one of the ag economists surveyed each month, says even with the global grain and oilseed supply weather issues, his outlook on the ag economy hasn't really changed.
I don't think it really has. If anything, I think it's become a little bit more challenging. But I say that within the context, I think that the new world we're in is going to have more challenges, but those challenges will also create more opportunities. It just means we're going to have to be more strategic. We went through several years where you could be a lazy marketer and do pretty well, build equity in your farm, expand your operation, buy equipment, etc. We're going to have to be more strategic in it now, and I think the opportunities are going to be there for the person willing to do so.
The April survey found nearly 80% of ag economists think current commodity prices plus higher input and operating costs will spur consolidation within the row crop sector. So this month, the survey then asked what purchasing decisions may take a hit in the months ahead. And top of the list was equipment.
So it seemed like machinery complement was really the number one. I don't think not a big surprise. Almost everyone thought that was one place where we would see cutbacks in terms of trying to reduce costs.
50% of ag economists say reduced machinery purchases is most likely, and another 50% said somewhat likely.
I think in the short term, the easy answer is they'll scale back on equipment purchases, and we've seen that. We would anticipate they'll scale back on some of those fertilizers that have less short-term impact, maybe phosphorus, potassium, some of those. I think they'll stick with the seed technology. They'll stick with the technology they think gives them the efficiencies that they need in their production.
Another change ag economists think farmers will make is to slow technology upgrades, with 35% saying likely and 41% saying somewhat likely. The monthly monitor also found ag economists think more farmers will make the switch to more generic products, with 73% surveyed saying that's somewhat likely. But another major change for the upcoming year could be farmers looking for lower interest rates.
Shopping for cheaper operating interest was towards the top of the list as well. After that, I think those were the big ones. Maybe some cutback in fertilizer. It was really, can I use technology better to reduce application rates on the fertilizer side? What's my current fertility program? Have I been doing really well? So maybe I can cut back for at least a year. Those were some of the big ones.
As more farmers possibly look at ways to cut back on spending, volatile commodity prices are proving that the direction of prices hinges on more than just supply and demand.
Well, I think the biggest impact is probably geopolitical risks and the advent of the funds trying to interpret all of that. And as you look at the managed money, billions of dollars now invested in commodities, either being long, buying them, or being short, selling them, based on what they see happening in geopolitics, based on what they see in the economy. Are we in a reinflation period? Are we in a commodity deflation period? And that's really driving the economy more than the actual supply and demand of fundamentals.
Still, Suderman and other economists say in the short term, the outlook for grain prices will center around supply.
I see as we're going forward that obviously you can't ignore weather. That's going to be critical. How we transition from El Nino to La Nina, how quickly is it? Is it going to impact our crops? Is it going to be the South American crops after that? You can't discount weather. But within that, we're moving through a year that's going to be critical to our economy and whether we reestablish inflation in our economy. Not only U.S. economy, but the global economy.
And in livestock, economists say demand and the health of the global economy will have a major impact on prices as we test just how much consumers are willing to pay for those products.
And the other is we're in a world economy where imports of beef in the first quarter of this year were up 25% year on year. So when we get too expensive, we simply import more. And then the consumer is kind of the driver of what that demand factor is. If we keep the consumer confidence, we prop it up, they're willing to pay it, which means import more but holding up our domestic prices. If they're not, then those imports start to overwhelm us and pressures beef prices even more.
Economists also think another wild card is China, saying the country could create both challenges and opportunities in the U.S. Trade frictions and tariffs could be a headwind, but economists say a possible tariff on used cooking oil imports from China could be an area of opportunity here in the U.S. That's as farmers look to weather the rest of 2024.
Producers, in terms of what they want to look at in 2025, are already beginning to focus on the changes they can make to be more efficient. This idea of how do I reduce cost when the prices for those inputs maybe aren't going to change as much as they would like, and how do I manage those margins is really, there are going to be some opportunities to do that to try to make 2025 a better year.
And with the Farm Bill finally seeing some movement last week, even with the House version passing the first key hurdle, the majority of ag economists think that we won't see a farm bill passed this year. The May Ag Economists Monthly Monitor asked the group of nearly 70 ag economists when they think Congress will pass a new farm bill. 68% say 2025, 13% think it could be 2026. One economist said if a farm bill is not completed in 2024, the dynamics could be even more difficult to get a farm bill passed in 2025, regardless of the outcome of the upcoming elections. All right, when we come back, wheat prices continue to soar. We'll take a look at agriculture around the globe. That's next.
Watch Markets Now with Michelle Rook on the Farm Journal YouTube channel, keeping you updated throughout the day on the markets at the open, midday, and close. Find out what moved the markets today and what to expect the market to do next.
Now for a glimpse of agriculture around the world. Wheat starting the week off hot as global production concerns continue, and it rallied on Tuesday well off of the March lows. U.S. wheat markets have been following wheat in Europe, which has also hit new highs. The rally has been tied to global wheat production concerns, but in particular in the Black Sea. One group in Russia cut its forecast for the wheat crop another 2 million metric tons to 81.5 million metric tons and lowered exports to 44 million. Sovecon lowered its Russian estimate 3.6 million to 82 million. Crops in Russia have been damaged by spring frost and drought.
We've had the two big private analysts out of Russia come in and lower production. Once again, ICAR and Sovecon both lowered production. Pretty good numbers as far as Russia's concerned. Still worried about the drought in the Black Sea region, as we saw Ukraine's numbers also lowered.
However, Ukraine wheat production has also been lowered to 19 million tons due to frost and drought, and the EU crop has had too much rain. The U.S. meat industry gathered in Kansas City last week for the annual U.S. Meat Export Federation Spring Conference, and one of the highlights was just how strong demand has been for U.S. pork around the globe. Randy Spronk, a pork producer and USMEF chair, said there was a sense of optimism among attendees about what's ahead for the rest of 2024 in terms of exports. I spoke to Spronk while he was in Kansas City, and he says pork producers are profitable again after what he called a very difficult 12 to 14 months. But he also noted a strong start to the year for pork exports.
On the pork side here, the first 3 months of the year, you're up 6% in volume, 7% in value, just a continual trend of, increasing exports, increasing value back to the farm within the United States.
In his remarks to attendees, Sprunk voiced a need to prioritize market access, saying new markets are needed, and one way is through lowering tariffs. Well, China is planning to request an investigation into the possible dumping of some pork products from the European Union. That report comes from China's state-backed Global Times. The report did not go into details. Reuters reports China imported a total of 1.55 million metric tons of pork last year, with the EU accounting for more than half of that total. The report comes as the EU is conducting investigations into some imports from China in an effort to protect homegrown manufacturing. Bayer is looking to beef up genome editing in vegetables. The Germany-based company saying it is working with a South Korean biotech company to develop genome editing tomato varieties. These varieties would be nutritionally enhanced with vitamin D3. In a release, the company saying vitamin D deficiency is a widespread issue, particularly in countries where winter sunlight is limited, which can lead to health issues. Part of the agreement is also to develop seeds for a broader variety of tomato products using genome editing. It's also working with U.S. ag startup Pairwise on that company's gene-edited mustard greens. All right, that's a look for the headlines around the globe. Well, if you think the severe weather here in the U.S. has been crazy this year, you're not alone. We'll talk about it in Chip's Corner next. Welcome back. Chip's Corner this weekend. All right, Chip, because of all of this severe weather that we've had, we've been following it closely. And we talked to USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey. That was at the beginning of May. And he said that April ended up being the second most active month on record for tornadoes. The only other year that beat it out was 2011. But as we got into May, my goodness, it seems that it's been even more active when it comes to severe weather.
Right. Right. It has been more active once we got into May. As a matter of fact, I had a conversation with Brett Waltz and Michael Clark over at BAMWX.com earlier this week. And we talked to the comparison to 2011 came up again. So it's the most severe season that we've seen since 2011. And Michael Clark had some interesting facts and figures coming out of that conversation that I had with him.
I'll tell you one thing, Chip, just for a couple of statistics here real quick. For the month of May in 2024, 469 tornadoes, 3,475 severe wind events, and 1,640 severe hail events just in the month of May of this year.
Oh, man.
When you look at the map, I'm looking at it right now, it's almost as if every state east of the Rockies almost has seen a tornado report for the month of May somewhere. It's actually crazy.
1,600 hail events? Is that what he just said?
Yes. Yeah. It's amazing the amount of severe weather that we've had. Quite frankly, I'm surprised that there's a year that's had more severe weather than what we've had in April and May of 2024. But you go back, 2011 checks out. It was a more severe year. But it's that transition time from El Nino to La Nina, and the continued cooling of the sea surface temperatures out in the Pacific Ocean along the equator, that is really driving a lot of this. Now, as we got into the summer month, the summer weather outlook and what the guys at BAMWX expect, they basically said, hey, heads up for the second half of the growing season. As La Nina starts to settle in, the severe weather outbreaks might start to diminish, or should start to diminish for us, but it means that heat's going to move in. It means that some drier weather is going to move in. It means that we need to really watch what's going on in the Western Corn Belt. People in Iowa are familiar with that Highway 71 split. Take a look at where Highway 71 is in Iowa. West of that, we should be looking for A less than ideal second half of the growing season, but heat and drier conditions, I think, should be expected across the entire Corn Belt, according to what we heard from the guys at BAM-WX.
Yeah, and in some of those coastal areas, NOAA's warning because of that transition to La Nina, we will probably see a more active hurricane season. So also have to keep that in mind too. Chip Flory, host of AgriTalk, you can listen to him live 10 a.m. every day. AgriTalk AM, well, every weekday. And then 2 p.m. in the afternoon for AgriTalk PM. Chip, thanks so much. All right, when we come back, if you're looking for the perfect road trip this summer, we may have one for you. We're hitting the road with American Countryside's Andrew McCrea next. Well, if you're still searching for a summer road trip, North Dakota may be calling your name, as Andrew McCrea shows us in American Countryside this weekend.
Gary Greff grew up in Regent, North Dakota. The town wasn't large, but had several businesses, and his dad ran the local grain elevator. Gary became a teacher and later a principal, serving in several schools in North Dakota and Montana. After his most recent tenure as principal, he made a trip back to his hometown.
While I was looking for this job, I saw that the town of Regent had gone from a town of 500 to a town of roughly 100 people. The town had basically was dying.
Soon Gary's focus was not on another principal job, but what to do for his hometown. Regent was 30 miles from thousands of cars traveling on Interstate 94, but how could he lure people down the road? He eventually decided that creating huge scrap metal sculptures along the highway might do the trick. But perhaps Gary had a huge obstacle in his way.
Never laid a bead of weld in my life, never had an art class, just said, let's go for it.
His first sculpture was of a family, man, woman, and child, using large oil tanks as the foundation for the piece. It took almost 3 years to construct, and it was now Gary's full-time job. He lived meagerly, but he says he enjoyed the time he could spend with his siblings and aging parents as he worked on the project. Some in the community were skeptical.
When you bring art into a farming community, you know what farmers think of art. Artists are not considered, part of farming.
Gary says farmers are artists, though, with what they do with the land, and his sculptures often share scenes from rural America. The first 4 sculptures didn't attract huge crowds, but once he placed one near the interstate, travelers began to come. Gary describes the scenes he's created as you drive south to Regent.
You start at Geese in Flight, that's on the interstate. From there you go to the Deer Crossing, and then after that we hit Grasshoppers in the Field. From Grasshoppers in the Field we hit Fisherman's Dream. Then we go to Pheasants on the Prairie, and then we go to Teddy Rides again, and we go to the world's largest tin family, and then finally in town you see the Knight and the Dragon.
Today it is known as the Enchanted Highway, and it draws thousands of visitors every year. When the local school closed, he purchased it and turned the classrooms into hotel rooms, and also created a steakhouse and tavern, yet left touches like the old gym where people can still play basketball. There are more sculptures to create and more ideas he hopes to bring to fruition, especially when you consider he didn't know how to weld when he began the process. He hopes his work inspires others in small towns. Perhaps young people will be inspired to stay, create, and build businesses in rural areas. It's hard but rewarding work.
I will not see my project completed in my lifetime. We do have a new board now, Enchanted Highway Board. We have new people on there that are committed to keeping the project alive, because when I die, I hate to see it die when I die.
If not for these sculptures, the road behind me might carry just local and farm traffic. But thanks to the Enchanted Highway, a few thousand come every year and make this a destination for many. Traveling the countryside near Regent, North Dakota, I'm Andrew McCrea.
Thanks, Andrew. And you can follow more of Andrew's travels on our Farm Journal YouTube page. When we come back, a sad update on a cow who captured the hearts of many. From the Farm is next. Well, a sad update on a story we've been following for months. Number 88, the cow that had become a social media sensation, has died, and it's a reminder of the realities on the ranch. Clay Scott, who's a Kansas rancher and a farmer we talked to a few weeks ago, sharing this update on social media, saying, quote, "Our girl passed away." Number 88's story started in early April when Scott shared a video of 88 referencing the eclipse and her size. She quickly gained a worldwide following, and Scott used 88's pregnancy journey as a way to educate her captivated audience about raising cattle and farming. We spoke to Scott a few weeks ago, and he was very transparent about how concerned he was with her size.
I am concerned about her size and the size of the calf. I don't want her to struggle because the calf gets too big. So that's why we're actually limiting her intake right now to not cause any more trouble than she's probably already going to have with her size. I'm hoping for twins, to be honest. If it's twins, I'll feel a lot better.
When she went into labor last week, he posted an update explaining the high risk of her pregnancy again. Number 88 ended up losing that calf during birth, but she seemed to be recovering well. But then on Memorial Day, Scott shared the news that she had passed away. Scott knew the world was watching, and just a tragic ending for a cow that touched so many. But it seems like this story isn't over, because his posts since on X have really continued to garner a lot of attention as he continues to share agriculture's story. All right, that's all the time we have on U.S. Farm Report this weekend. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to join us next week, or actually on the road. We have a live taping of U.S. Farm Report next Wednesday at World Pork Expo. So if you're in Des Moines, Iowa, make sure to join us for that over the lunch hour. But then we'll be focused on pork next week on U.S. Farm Report as we work to continue to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.